Welcome back, everyone, to this Week 5 edition of Bruce Monnin's Computer Points podcast. I am Bruce Monnin, your host, recording from our studio in Minster, Ohio. Checking in this week from deep in the bowels of the state of California.
Are there bowels?
I don't know. We have our co-host, Alexandra Trumble. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, Dad.
Anything exciting happening in California?
Oh, probably lots. There was a lot of excitement in Ohio today, but we had beautiful weather here in California, so I gotta miss it all.
So Alex is gracious enough to bless us with her presence from her trip to California. Back home in Cincinnati, our 2-1 Cincinnati Bearcats destroyed the Houston Cougars 34-0 to kick off Big 12 play. Did you see any of that, Alex?
I think so. Did I? I think we did something. Oh, that was the day of the Oktoberfest. So we saw a little bit while Jack was napping, and then we went down to Oktoberfest Cincinnati.
Always good to get a little Oktoberfest practice in before the big thing next week in Minster, Ohio.
Yes. Is it next week already? More for the 10K.
Next week, as in 10 days from recording day here. The first picnic table arrived in the park today. You'll be happy.
Oh, momentous day.
Back to our Bearcats. If the season ended at 4 p.m. last Saturday, Cincinnati would have earned the Big 12's automatic playoff berth for being at the top of the Big 12 standings.
Woo-hoo. How many conference games have they played?
One.
That's how they got in the first top half.
Yes. Up next this week, they play at 3-1 Texas Tech Saturday night at 8 p.m. At first, I thought that was pretty cool. Primetime game on ESPN2. Mm-hmm. And then I found out at the same time, Alabama is playing Georgia on another channel.
Oh.
So I think I know where most of the viewers are going to be.
Maybe they'll flip over on commercial breaks.
Always a hope. We'll get halftime highlights, maybe. Let's just say they will interrupt the Cincinnati game quite often to show highlights of what's happening in the Alabama-Georgia game. Whether the reverse happens, I'm not so certain.
How would you know? You'd be on the UC game the whole time anyway.
That's true. I'll never know, will I? Also on the football front, I watched the glorious Cincinnati Bengals go to 0-3 last night.
Glorious.
Actually, the quarterback, Joe Burrow, didn't look too bad. Speaking of which, I heard you just learned about a new sport out your way, Alex, involving a burrow.
One of my coworkers is from Colorado, and they apparently have burrow racing in Colorado, where you run, and while you run, you trail run, you convince a donkey to run alongside you for the trail run. So I'm assuming it has to be a combination of athleticism and donkey whispering.
How far did you say that race is?
She did one that was 8 miles.
Does a donkey run 8 miles?
Hers didn't. It took her 3 hours, she said.
No, maybe I should get into that. I could handle that pace, I think.
Yes. It sounds like the people who trained with their donkeys, she said, had some people that ran 5-minute miles with their donkeys. So like it can get competitive.
Ooh.
I can't run. I would never make a donkey run 5-minute miles. I can't run 5-minute miles. I would never make a donkey run 5-minute miles.
No, that's beyond my capabilities, and my cardiologist would advise me not to do that anyway, so I have an excuse.
We won't see you running the 10K in 2 weeks, donkey or no?
I will not be running the 10K. I may wake up in time to see part of it. That's about it.
That's fair.
It reminds me, one of my favorite local sports has already occurred this year, the bicycle donut race.
The Tour de Donut.
The Tour de Donut. I hear it moved towns this year. That it moved to Troy, I believe.
Oh.
It's an interesting concept. You race your bicycle, but there are several stops along the day where they have very large donuts, and you get 5 minutes deducted off your time for every donut. And the winning time is often negative.
How many miles?
Not for me. I don't know what it is now. When we did it, I think it was about 20, 25, something like that.
That's totally doable then.
Yes. We decided next time our strategy is not to eat any donuts until the last stop and eat them all there. Eating donuts early in the race is not really a good idea.
Fair.
But but those kind of events are gone now for the year. We are in the heart of high school football season. We just finished week 5. That means the regular season is now half over, which means maybe when I say a team is playoff bound, it's not as outrageous as it sounded 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's getting closer.
Well, as usual, with Alex here to help out, we are going to start with Division One and work our way down.
You could really mix it up some week, Dad, and do like odd divisions first and then even, or follow some like pull a random number generator and be like, this week we're starting with 2.
Ooh, I could have them all like in a bag and pull the chits out of the bag.
Yeah.
Next region is Region 26. Be like bingo night.
Yeah, or Jack's been excited about rolling dice, so like that could be really cool.
Maybe I can get Rebecca on that to make a multi-sided dice with each of our regions on it so that when he rolled it, it could come up. All right, we'll put Rebecca. She is still executive producer, even as she is hiding out at we'll call it an undisclosed location this week. All will be revealed next week when she returns to her role, I think. Not a total promise, but I think so.
We don't know how much will be revealed.
That's true. She might not want to reveal anything. And she owes me. I've had her cats here for a while, so.
How many sided dice would that be?
You're going to make me think now.
Yeah.
4, 5,
This is the math podcast.
14-sided die. I don't know if that exists. Maybe we could do a 12-sided and we could just take out 2 of them, like the 8-man in Region 1, and just jumble up the ones in the middle, maybe.
Sure. Region 1's had its fair share of being first.
That's true. And it will be again this week, because I like to start with an easy one. And we only follow one team in Division 1, Region 1. That is Findlay. They are number 9. They earned their playoff spot officially now by beating 1-4 Fremont Ross. And I think they'll secure it a little further by defeating 1-4 Holland Springfield this coming. So look for Findlay to be hanging out in the middle of the pack somewhere near that number 9 spot again next week.
Very good.
Moving to Division 2, Region 8. 3 of the 4 teams we cover here earned victories this week. So a good week for our schools here. We'll start with number 5, Lima Senior rolls on. Still undefeated. They're going to be undefeated at the regular season. They're winning big every week. Moved up from number 6 last week. I don't think they're going to get much, if any, higher than the number 5 they're at now, just because the teams they play aren't going to provide that many computer points. They're not exactly loaded up with second level points. 2 other teams, number 11 Sydney, number 15 Piqua, both won. Both are nicely in the top 16 at the moment. So if the season ended today, they would be in the playoffs. Always nice.
Always nice.
Sydney plays against their second consecutive winless team this week.
Not many second level point opportunities.
No, they're not rolling into second level points these 2 weeks. But after that win, that will get them to 4-2, assuming they win that game. They may need an upset in one of their final 4 weeks to make the postseason. They are not favored in any of their final 4 games. They're not incredible underdogs either, so an upset's not out. The 15th ranked team, Piqua, they can pretty much ensure their playoff spot if they can get a win over 2-3 Troy this week. And as we've mentioned before, that's a heated rivalry, especially when the teams have maybe a little better records than the 2-3 they both are this year. Still a good rivalry no matter what.
I said, this is our rivalry triangle.
Yes, it is. And speaking of the last team in the triangle, number 19 Troy, if they can beat Piqua, they probably earn their playoff spot with that win. If they lose, they might need to beat Sydney in week 10.
This would have been a better reference for the rivalry triangle than the previous one.
It worked out. In Division 3, Region 10, we're going to start with Defiance. 3-2 record. They rose 3 spots to number 6 after they beat the other team we follow in this region, Lima Shawnee. Defiance is also favored by double digits in their final 5 games of the season.
Wow.
If they win all 5 of those, they might just earn a top 4 spot in the region and get a host 2 playoff games. Now, On the opposite end, Lima Shawnee had the easier games on their schedule early and the tougher part of their league conference schedule late. They are 2-3. They are now number 13 after the loss last week. They probably need 2 wins to reach the playoffs, but they are double-digit underdogs all five of their remaining games. Just the opposite of Defiance. Their next 2 games are against Wapakoneta and St. Mary's, so they are big underdogs the next 2. They're probably going to need to get those 2 wins in the final 3 weeks of the season. Though an upset in either of those 2 games would certainly be worth a lot of computer points.
Makes sense.
And
so watching them closely for the rest of the season since they're still on the bubble.
Yep, Lima Shawnee, I have a feeling, is a team that's going to be hanging around that bubble week 9 and 10. We'll be talking about them up to the end, I think. As an aside here, for those of you who don't know, I have a weekly column in the Salina Daily Standard for the computer points of just the WBL and the MAC teams. And I can tell you from following the WBL very closely, there's always strange results happening that way. The MAC, you could almost predict it right down the line. Boom, 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 boom. Here's what'll happen. The WBL, and you'll see that when we get to one of our scores of the week later in the podcast. All right, Division 3, Region 12. We will start at the top. 5-0 Tip City Tippecanoe. They remain number 1. They barely survived against 2-3 Troy this week, which made me think, maybe they're going to have trouble staying at that number 1 spot. Or maybe Tip City Troy's enough of a rivalry that it just became that close of a game. They should finish number 1 as long as they only lose 1 of the 5 remaining games. They are favored to win all 5, so winning 4 of them doesn't seem like much of a stretch. So I'm expecting Tippecanoe to hold on to that number 1 seed at the end of the season. At number 2, we have undefeated Wapakoneta.
Undefeated.
They are 3 or more touchdown favorites the rest of the way through the regular season. So they should finish 10-0. That probably gets them the number 2 seed, although I've been watching Cincinnati. Archbishop McNicholas has been moving up and could possibly edge them out. But either way, Wapak will get the 2 or the 3 seed. There's really not a lot of difference in the playoffs between those 2. You still get home games your first 2 games. And if you play them eventually, it'll be at some neutral site somewhere halfway or so. So should work out well for Wapak either way if they don't suffer any large upsets.
I was thinking like, well, maybe the advantage is that you get to play a team that's not as good, but that would be if you were the 2 seed, not the 3 seed. So it wasn't a real advantage, right?
Right. You want to avoid the 4 seed sometimes so you don't have to play the 1 in the semifinals. You want to be 2 or 3 kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like when we get to Minster later on, they don't want to be number 4 where they play Marion Local in the semifinals. They want to wait till the finals to play. Anyway, next we have Bellefontaine. They are 4-1. They moved up 2 places to number 6 and locked up a playoff spot if they can upset 5-0 London this week. Now, we mentioned London way back in one of our preview episodes. That's a new team to this region. We feared they might come in and win the whole thing. They're 5-0, so they're up there in the computer points. They're going to be fairly high when the season's done. A little side research here tells me that 5-0 London is actually ranked 11th in this region right now. Ooh.
I appreciate that you literally go to the side and go off camera to do your research.
Yeah, I really need to open up the browser here. So we'll do that. Little further research tells me the reason London is ranked number 11, despite being undefeated, is the 5 teams they have defeated have a combined 1 win between them.
Oof.
So they have not quite been challenged yet. A little further research here shows their remaining 5 opponents have a record of 17-8. So the schedule toughens up quite a bit, and so do the computer points opportunities there. Well, a loss by Bellefontaine to London means they still have a 99% chance to play in the postseason, which is probably a good thing because they are about a 2-touchdown underdog in that game. The next four opponents for 3-2 St. Mary's have a combined record of 5-15. That's good news for St. Mary's future record, bad news for their future computer points. In order to earn a home playoff game, the Rough Riders probably need to sweep those four games and maybe even beat 4-1 Lima Bath in week 10. That game against Lima Bath could be a big one for home field advantage type reasons in week 10.
Home field advantage as get the positioning of their playoff.
Yep, trying to get in that top 8 so you host a playoff game, or better yet, in the top 4 so you can host 2 of them. Right? Speaking of which, we have 4-1 Salina dropped one place down to number 10 after they beat 1-4 Kenton. The Salina Bulldogs favored against 1-4 Elida this week, as you would think. And then they probably need one more win to reach the playoffs. The challenge for them is that those four opponents have a combined record of 14-6 right now. I think they can find a win in there somewhere, but it's not going to be easy. They're going to have to work for it. Division 4, Region 14. We follow 6 teams here. 5 of them have a big L next to them on my chart, which means they took the loss this week. So not good news for the teams we follow in this region. We will start with the good news, however. 3-2 Napoleon. They were the only team that we follow who earned a victory. They moved up 3 spots to number 10 with their win, and they should lock down a playoff berth if they can get a win over 1-4 Fremont Ross this week. Good news for Napoleon, it sounds like.
Sure does.
Now, if anyone watches my website very closely, and from the comments I receive, they must not, they will see that I removed Napoleon from the ranks of the playoff bound this week. Last week we said they were playoff bound. This week it says they are not quite. Actually, they have a 99+% chance of being in the playoffs right now. There were a few results last week that were unexpected that moved them from absolute 100% locked in down to the 99.9% most probably locked in. In reality, they're in. It's just not quite a mathematical one.
Does that mean your models have a certain margin of error in them that you need to account for when you state 99% certain, etc.?
Yes, the way I do it is there are certain results that if a team is 99+% expected to win, we just put down that's a win. That happens and we're counting that in. Mathematically, that's not quite true, but we figure in reality, it really is. And so my numbers are a little more aggressive than some people have that predict when teams are in the playoffs, but I think mine are probably a lot closer to real life. That's at least my theory, and I'm sticking to it. Here, the rest of our thing. We have Ottawa Glandorf, 2-3. They're currently ranked number 16. They need 2 more wins to make the playoffs, or they could pretty much guarantee getting into the postseason if they could pull the mild upset over 4-1 Lima Bath this week. Lima Bath has the much better record, but it should really be fairly close game, I think, within a couple of touchdowns. At 1-4, Elida, Kenton, and Van Wert, all from the WBL, all need at least an upset or probably 2 just to get back into where we need to talk about them again. They are really in bad shape as far as chances to make the playoffs right now. Over in Region 16 of Division 4, we follow 2 teams here. Urbana, still undefeated, inched up 1 spot to number 5 with a win last week. Pretty much locked down a playoff berth, but it's not 99 point enough percent for me to give it to them just yet. It's close, but not quite there. They beat Jonathan. If they can beat 3-2 Jonathan Alder this week, then they're about them. Our number 17 team is Tip City Bethel. They are 2-3. We said last week they needed to beat 3-2 Covington if they wanted to be in contention for the playoffs, and they did so. So they're right back 1 spot out of the top 16 right now, but hanging close. Bethel is still only favored in 1 of its last 5 games, and they really need to win 3 of those 5 games to stay in the top 16 or to get into the top 16. There's an outside chance they could with 2, but they really need 3 wins in the last 5 games.
That seems doable since there's 5 games left.
Yep, you would hope so. If they want to be in the playoffs, they ought to be able to win a few, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of teams that can win a few in Division 5 Region 18, we'll start with Liberty Center, 5-0, currently number 2. They moved up one spot after a 70-0 win this. The
70
average
0.
70, yes, 70. The average score of their games this season has been 45-3.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's been a couple of years straight now that's been going on at Liberty Center. Our other
But
team,
for if their average points are 45, in this game they were 70, they probably had some that were lower too.
yes, they had some where they only scored in the 30s.
Yeah.
I'm sure the Liberty Center fans were asking for refunds after those games.
I bet that was an exciting game. Yeah, that probably is, if this game was their opponent had 0 and their average is their opponent gets 3, maybe those games they're 30 something to like 7.
Yes, they've had 2 games this year. They've given up 7 points, and 3 games where they have given up 0.
Wow.
Oh, and the scary part is I just did that from memory too.
Yeah.
Anyways. Our other team, 4-1 Liberty Benton, dropped 2 positions down to number 10 after they won 45-0 over winless Elmwood. So the computer doesn't care how much you win by. The computer only cares that your opponent was winless, and there's no second level points for you. Liberty Benton is, however, favored to win their final 5 games. They're just favored to win them by slightly less than Liberty Center.
Now,
They might only win by 20 points.
But is the first name meaning that they're both nearby, or do they both happen to be named Liberty?
Liberty Benton is near Findlay, so it's not real close to Liberty Center, but it's not incredibly far away.
It's just sort of a coincidence that the only teams we follow in this region are both our Liberties.
Yes, it is. We've noted that a couple of times already. It's our Liberty region.
Or Liberty region. I have probably heard you say that many times, and that just never retained to me. So
if I had to take an uneducated guess, and that's what it is, it would not surprise me if the town for Liberty Center and the school for Liberty Benton happen to be located in a Liberty Township somewhere in their counties. Just a guess.
Seems reasonable.
And now, before we head to Division 5, we hit Score of the Week, number 1.
Scores of the Week!
I decided to go with 2 scores of the week again this week, Alex.
That seems acceptable.
This is one of those WBL games. Lima Bath 62, Elida 56. Now, I watched this game, which I have in quotation marks on my notes here, because it was on the TV on WOSN while I was writing the article for the Minster Coldwater game and reviewing the Minster game film to get their statistics right. So I wasn't paying real close attention, but it sure seemed like about every 2 minutes, someone was scoring again.
I would like to clarify that your quotations were for watching and not game in your notes.
Yes, I was, yeah, this me doing air quotes in the air does nothing here, but I was watching the game.
Yes.
In fact, I did start paying closer attention at the end of the game because, close game and it was at the end. And Lima Bath scored the game-winning touchdown with only 9 seconds remaining on the clock. So very high scoring and very dramatic at the same time.
How fun. I bet those marching bands got to play a lot.
Oh, yes. And whoever think WOSN likes to have a scoreboard sponsor every time the score changes, and whoever that was got mentioned a lot. Yeah. It was probably Lee's famous recipe chicken or something like that.
If only you were watching, you would know.
Well, I semi-watched several games, so I don't remember who was the sponsor of which one.
Sure.
And by the way, if you're a sponsor of WOSN, do not take that as a reason to reduce your sponsorship. Over in Region 20 next, we'll start with 5-0 Sales. They moved up 1 position in number 2 after they beat 1-4 Parkway this week. This coming week, they face off against undefeated Marion Local. in quite the big top of the MAC matchup here.
Yeah, so they're both going in undefeated.
Yes, indeed. A win for Versailles would ensure the Tigers a home playoff game. If they happen to lose this one, they can just get wins in any other two remaining games to earn that home playoff game. That's probably their more likely option here. Marion Local is just a juggernaut. It could get ugly to be like every other Marion Local game this year. We mentioned Lima Bath in our score of the week. They are 4-1. They barely survived in that 62-56 shootout against 1-4 Elida and fell one place to number 5 in the standings. All those points scored, and they fell a spot in the computer standings. Again, the computer doesn't care how many points you score, does it?
No, I guess not.
If they can get a win this week over 2-3 Ottawa Glandorf, and what I think ought to be a close game, that will guarantee them the playoffs. And it would be good to get it here because Bath is actually, despite being 4-1, an underdog in its final 4 games. That's a team that definitely has a backloaded WBL schedule. Next, we have 3-2 Miami East. They lost their second game in a row to Sidney Lehman, I believe. I actually talked to Sonny Folks at Press Pros Magazine, who was there. He was kind of surprised by that result. But anyway, that dropped Miami East down to number 7 in the standings. They have a big 50-50 type game against 2-3 Milton Union this week, and a win punches their ticket to the playoffs. This is perhaps a bigger game for number 15 Milton Union, who would almost be assured of the postseason with a win themselves.
So it sounds like they have 2 close games back to back.
Yes, indeed. Well, that tends to happen when your record is close to 500 and you're playing other teams whose record is close to 500.
Does that make sense?
To be honest, those are the ones that get most interesting to me this time.
Right. I wonder, so now since are they going to be more motivated with another close game, or do you think like they had won their previous game, would be more likely to be in the winning mindset to win their next game?
Boy.
Psychology. I don't know how all that plays for.
If I could know that, if I knew that, I could work with the coaching staff because I imagine they all want to sort of thing.
That's what you should be trending. That's what you should be trending on your side projects, like based off of patterns, what's likely to happen.
That'd be one thing if you were. Don't look at me to be taking psych projects here. I just took psychology for an easy A. That's all I did.
Sorry, side projects.
Oh, side projects. Oh, okay. Yeah, side project. I'm kind of need something else to do to occupy my time here during football season. So.
You could do that on the off season.
Yeah, I could. I did something like that once with a whether you should punt or go for it on 4th down in high school football.
Yeah, like that.
The coach, I gave it to Minster's head coach, who took a look at it, said it looked really interesting, and then I don't think ever considered it again after.
You coaches out there listening, if you want to know, Bruce Monnin can be reached at
ED Monnin at nktelco.net, correct?
Correct.
By the way, our next team we're following also has a close to 500 record, 3-2 Indian Lake. They fell to number 8 after losing to 4-1 Bell Fountain. I actually talked to someone who was at that game too. It's amazing how much that sort of thing comes up in my conversations on the weekend. They went to see, I believe Bell Fountain has a quarterback who's going to go to Ohio State next year. So they get the Ohio State fans showing up to scout out the future quarterback.
Wow.
Although these people were actually fans of North Dakota, I believe, there's not too many of them around here, by the way.
I believe that.
Back to Indian Lake. If they can get victories over winless Graham and winless Ben Logan the next 2 weeks, that should be enough to reach the postseason. It's always nice when you just have to beat the winless teams to make it into the playoffs. In case they suffer an upset loss in one of those 2 games, they also face 2 teams with 1-4 records later in the schedule. So a light finish to the season for Indian Lake.
Yeah. Not too many second level points, so they're probably not going to advance much more.
No, Indian Lake's not looking for a lot of new second level points. They better have gotten them early. West Liberty Salem is 4-1. They defeated 2-3 Madison Plains, but they stayed way back at number 12. Realistically, I have them already into the playoffs. The teams they beat will be playing each other, and the second level points will come in. This is not the toughest region to make the playoffs, as you may have figured from that Indian Lake talk the last time. But one more win for West Liberty Salem makes it a mathematical lock. We love our mathematical locks here on this podcast.
We do.
And finally, we have 3-2 Arcanum moved up 2 positions to number 14, thanks to a win over 2-3 Tri-County North. If they can beat 3-2 National Trail, that should keep the Trojans in the top 16 all the way through the regular season and into the playoffs.
It's like, wow, we're already to Division 6, but these get to be the longer ones, don't they?
On to our bigger regions now. We have Division 6 Region 22, and by bigger, I mean we follow more teams, not there's more teams in them.
And not that they're bigger schools.
And not that they're bigger schools. Well, that's relative. They're bigger than the 8-man footballs.
But smaller than our previous conversations.
We'll start with Patrick Henry. They are 4-1. They rose 2 places to number 6 with an easy victory over winless Bryan. And with that, they joined 5-0 Bluffton as being playoff bound. Bluffton, by the way, number 3 in the rankings at this time. They are also cruising through the season and probably won't be challenged until week 10 when they play Columbus Grove. Spalding remains undefeated, but they're still only ranked number 6, and we do not have them in the postseason yet. And why is that, you might say?
Yeah, why is that?
Well, thank you very much.
I was going to say, based off of our previous conversations, I'm guessing they don't have many second level points.
Well, let's see. It says here the Pirates' first 5 victims have a combined record of 2-23. So yes, you are correct. And when that happens, that generates very few second level points. Now, Spalding is probably in the playoffs already, but one more victory guarantees they will be playing a game in week 11. 3-2 Spencerville fell 3 spots to number 8 after losing big to Bluffton. That's 2 losses in a row, but as we said last week, lots of teams are going to lose big to Columbus Grove and Bluffton. The Spencerville Bearcats are underdogs the next 4 weeks, but I think they should likely earn enough computer points from those 3 wins early in the season to make the playoffs. Number 9, Van Buren, number 11, Allen East, and number 12, Tenora, all won last week, all improved their records to 3-2. All 3 have a good chance at the postseason, although Tenora, being the lower ranked of the 3, probably has the best chance, and Van Buren has the toughest path to the playoffs, but they all look pretty good right now, and we'll get into more details of that next week, I believe. 3-2 Sherwood Fairview suffered a tough 35-34 loss to Tenora, and they dropped 4 places to number 14. However, the Apaches are favored in their final 5 games and may not need any of those wins to be in the playoffs. So they're favored to win their last 5. They might not even need to win any of them. This region seems kind of easy to get into the playoffs too, doesn't it?
I suspect if they don't win any of them, they might not be in the best playing condition to make it very far once they make it to the playoffs.
That's true. You want a little more momentum than a 6-game losing streak, don't you?
I would suspect so.
Next up, we have 2-3 Convoy Crestview and 2-3 Hicksville. I project both of these teams still need 3 more wins to reach the playoffs. Crestview is favored in 2 games, so that's close to 3, while Hicksville is an underdog at all 5 matchups. So, not good news for Hicksville, it sounds like. And last week we said that 1-4 Wayne Trace would have a 65 chance to make the playoffs if they could upset 3-2 Edgerton. And they did that, but it turns out we were just a little bit off. They now have a 69% chance at the playoffs, even better than the 65 we were saying last week. Good news for 1-4 Wayne Trace. The Raiders will need to win the 3 games in which they are favored to get into the playoffs. Perhaps they need to pull a mild upset in one other game to make sure they get in. So at least 3 more wins, maybe 4. But it's nice to get them back in the picture. If they'd have lost last week, their odds would not have been good at all. Moving over to Region 23, 4-1 Mechanicsburg remained at number 11 after defeating 2-3 Springfield Central Catholic. If they can get a win over 2-3 West Jefferson, that just about seals the spot in the playoffs. That should be an interesting game. West Jefferson, I think, is a lot better team than that 2-3 record. To be honest, Mechanicsburg, I think, well, they're 4-1. I think that should be about a toss-up game, to be honest. That's a better game than the records would indicate, in my opinion. Ooh, and it's time for Score of the Week number 2, Alex.
Scores of the Week.
And I'm going to cheat a little on this one because I did see this game. It was Coldwater 24, Minster 21. And I include this because it was just a really great high school football game. Coldwater led early. They had a great interception. The defender tipped the ball up in the air and then caught it when it came down, returned it all the way for a touchdown, although a penalty brought the ball back, so he lost out on his nice return touchdown. A few plays later, Coldwater scored to take the early lead. Minster scored twice in the second quarter, stopped Coldwater with an interception in the end zone right before half to lead 14-7 at intermission.
Ooh.
Coldwater scored the next 2 times to lead 21-14. Minster then tied it up 21-21 in the fourth quarter. And then finally, Coldwater kicked a late 31-yard field goal for the win with about just under 2 minutes to go in the game. Minster had the ball back, 4 pass plays, no completions. Coldwater defense shut them down at the end to hold on to the win. Not a perfect game. There were 5 turnovers total. There were 4 interceptions. There was a fumble. There were penalties all over the place. But it was a very good ebb and flow game. Two very good teams. Coldwater remains undefeated. Minster takes its first loss of the year.
I was going
And
to
of
say,
course,
how many times has Minster been a score of the week this season?
2, I think.
Did it
Maybe
get
3. I don't
3?
know.
They won 5 games.
Well, I'm actually at their games. It's easy to make them score of the week. I see what happens.
There could have been 4 other games that were just as exciting to watch had you been there.
But I wasn't. So, to be honest, I didn't get a chance to look it up, but I was curious about that Defiance Tenora 35-34 win over Sherwood Fairview too. I didn't take the effort to look up the details of that one, unfortunately. So, honorable mention to that game, maybe.
I think that's fair, probably.
So we move down to Division 6 Region 24 now, and we start with that 5-0 Coldwater team. They are now guaranteed to finish in the top 4 thanks to that win over Minster. I honestly think Coldwater is going to finish ranked number 1 in this region. And if so, we'll put in the early prediction now. I'd like them to host Covington in the first round. Not bad. Picking playoff games with 5 weeks to go in the regular season. I feel pretty good about that one.
It is orange on your spreadsheet, and they are orange, so.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guarantee it. I'm pretty sure Coldwater will be number 1. The hard part's picking which team's going to be number 16. Next up, we have 3-2 Anna. They survived 21-14 against 2-3 St. Henry in what was probably the MAC computer point game of the week. Anna moved up 1 place to number 3. If they can get a win over 2-3 Delta St. John's this week, that should allow the Rockets to host a home postseason game. I already have them as locked into the playoffs. Always like to have that first game at home. I just mentioned 3-2 Covington before. They were upset this last week. They are the underdog in their final 5 games. If they lose all 5, they have a 50% chance to make the playoffs. And as I mentioned before, probably as the number 16 seed and a chance to go travel to Coldwater for that first playoff game. If they can get a win somewhere, well, maybe they can get a little less daunting first round playoff game.
Yeah, that's the benefit of being 14 or 15, perhaps.
Yes, it is. And our 14 we follow here, 2-3 Lima Perry, are favored in 3 of their final 5 games. If they did that, that would likely have them finish 1 spot ahead of Covington in the standings. So at about number 15. So 3 wins needed for Lima Perry. They are favored in 3 games. So that's another team we'll be watching all the way through week 10, I believe. Okay, moving down to our smallest 11-man football division, Division 7. Oh, look at all those teams. And I say that every week. We had 3 new teams we are declaring playoff bound this week. 4-1 Lima Central Catholic, 4-1 Ada, and 3-2 Arlington. And we already had 5 other teams that we consider playoff bound. That would be 5-0 Columbus Grove, 4-1 Hardin Northern, 3-2 Pandora Gilboa, 4-1 Upper Saddle Valley, and 3-2 Macomb. So that accounts for half of the playoff teams in this region, Alex.
Ooh,
Most of the drama's gone already, huh?
yeah, look at that. Scrolling through your list, there's a fair number down there that have some pretty tough chances.
Yes, that's true. As you said, if 8 of the playoff spots are already taken up, there's only 8 left for everyone else to fight over.
Yeah.
We'll start at the top as we often do. Number 1 seed Columbus Grove is actually down to their 3rd string quarterback. They've had lost 2 quarterbacks to injury.
Wow.
I believe they actually run the ball a lot. They're still expected to roll through the next 4 games until they play Bluffton in week 10 and to end up with the number 1 seed, no matter what happens in that last game.
Is it common for this small of a school to have a 3rd string quarterback ready to go?
Who said he was ready to go? I don't know the details.
Their JV team's probably struggling though.
Yeah. If they play freshman ball, they might not be using the normal person that played quarterback for the freshmen of the JV teams. That's for sure. Lima Central Catholic at Ada tied for the number 3 spot in the standings right now, thanks to quality wins over Fort Laramie and Macomb, respectively. LCC faces a tough 5-0 Bluffton team this week. But even if they lose that game, they might earn almost as many computer points as Ada will if they win, as they play winless Arcadia this. So expect, even with a loss, Lima Central Catholic to lose very little of any ground to Ada up there near number 3 in the standings. At number 7, Arlington has lost 2 in a row, and it potentially could grow to 3 in a row as they play 4-1 Liberty Benton this. The Red Devils are favored in 2 of their final 5 games and probably need those 2 wins and an upset over another team such as 3-2 Macomb or 3-2 Leipzig if they want to hold on to a spot in the top 8. They're good for the playoffs, however. Number 8, Hardin Northern should not change much in the standings as they play 1-4 Ridgedale this week. Odds are they'll win. Odds are their computer points will go up just enough. They'll stay in about the same place. Same thing applies to number 9 Pandora Gilboa, who plays against 0-5 Elmwood. Now, on the other hand, number 10 Upper Soda Valley plays 4-1 Ridgemont this week. If they get that win, as I like to say, they can tell the concession stand people, stock up. They have a game in week 11, buy more stuff.
A home game in week 11?
A home game in week 11, if they can beat Ridgemont this week. Yep.
Sweet.
Number 12, Macomb. Just looking their situation over, they seem unlikely to crack the top 8, even if they win their final 5 games, which seems strange, but there's some good teams above them, and there's not that many points in their final 5 games, and it looks to me like they might just win their final 5 games too. So I'm thinking they'll finish the season somewhere around the 7-10 range would be my best guess now. We'll zoom in on that a little more detail in the coming weeks. Alpha St. John's, a very interesting case. They are 2-3 right now. They moved up 3 spots to number 13 by beating 1-4 Fort Recovery. So you wouldn't think they'd be in that good a shape with 2 wins and one of them's against Fort Recovery. However, we have them as a 99% lock for the playoffs because the other team they beat was Sidney Lehman, who I think is going to finish the season 9-1.
Wow.
So the second level points just roll in from that game.
Wow.
In fact, I think, like I said, I think they'll make the playoffs if they lose their last 5. And to be honest, they have a game against Parkway they might win, but the other 4 look pretty tough. I've heard there's been a few injuries at Delphus too, so it's not going to help them out here. 3-2 Leipzig stayed at number 14 with a win over 0-5 Arcadia. And if they get a 4th win, that should make sure that they get into the playoffs. But no matter how it sounds, if they can get another win, I like them in the postseason. And finally, we have 2-3 Antwerp. They fell one spot to number 16 with an upset loss to 2-3 Hicksville. They're only favored once the rest of the way. And in that game, they are only favored by 1 point over winless Ayers.
Oh,
They're gonna need that win, and they're gonna need to find one more if they want to be in the playoffs. Okay, moving down to Region 28. In this region, we only have one new team who we have locked into the playoffs, and that is 2-3 DeGraff Riverside. But we already had 8 teams we considered playoff bound, so that makes it 9 playoff spots locked up already in this region. And
do you
that's
think
just of the teams we've.
like, does DeGraff get spot number 9, or is there a chance they could move up or down?
Oh yeah, they have a chance. They're just a nice team to be that we pretty much guarantee will finish in the top 16. Where they finish yet, we'll have to see. Depends on the rest of the season. I'm going to do a little different. We're going to start with the MAC teams here. 5-0 Marion Local rolls on. They officially haven't clinched a top 4 spot. They will. To be honest, they'll be number 1. There's an off chance they could fall to number 2. I wouldn't expect it, but there's an off chance. They still have a couple challenging games yet against Coldwater and Minster, and even Versailles this week. So, what? Versailles is 5-0, Coldwater's 5-0, Minster's 4-1. They have some challenges ahead of them yet, but even with a loss or two, even with 2 losses, I think they'll probably be number 1 in the final rankings.
Is that likely? I mean, who knows? It's likely, but they haven't had a loss in.
Some games, yes. No, it's not likely. It's been 50 some
Possible.
games without a loss. If they lose one, it might become a trend, just like winning ones. What do you think?
Possible. Every 50
Always
games.
possible. Yeah, we don't know. So far, the Flyers have shown no sign that they're going to lose one anytime soon. They've looked very, very solid. 3-2 New Bremen passed Minster for the second place in the standings after they lost to Marion Local 48-7 last week. The computer points, again, don't care how badly they lost. So it didn't hurt them that much that they got beat by 41 points. If the Cardinals want to finish in the top 8, they probably need 3 more wins, and they are favored in 3 games. So that's good news. The final 2 they're favored in are against 2-3 St. Henry and 2-3 Delphi St. John. Those, they might be favored, but they look like tough games. Maybe more importantly is next week when New Bremen plays Minster. I like the winner of that game to finish the season in one of the top 4 spots in this region for sure. Loser will have some work to do. Speaking of that, 4-1 Minster stayed at number 3 after losing to Coldwater in that score of the week. The Wildcats are favored in 4 more games, and if they win those 4, that would earn them a top 4 finish. Again, one of those games against New Bremen, they may be favored, but it's going to be a tough game. And we'll learn more when they play 2-3 St. Henry this week, who Drew Pasteur actually has listed as the 4th best team in this region. By the way, speaking of St. Henry, a win would put the number 12 Redskins in the playoffs. No, I think they're going to get in no matter what, even if they lose this week. And our final MAC team, 1-4 Port Recovery, needs a big upset if they're going to reach the postseason. And they have an opportunity for that playing at 3-2 New Bremen this week. New Bremen's going to end up with enough wins that a victory over them would bring in the second level points Port Recovery is going to need. But it's going to take an upset of that level, beating someone like a New Bremen or a Minster or something along that line if they want to see the postseason. Next up, Sidney Lehman. We mentioned them when we talked about Delphi St. John's in the last region. Sidney Lehman is 4-1, moved up 1 spot to number 5 after beating 3-2 Miami East in a Thursday night game. I like the occasional Thursday night game. Get a few of them out of the way before the busy Friday night.
Do they share stadiums?
Sidney Lehman does share a stadium with Sidney High School, so that might be part of the reason for it too. That's probably the actual reason for it. But, there's also a need occasionally to have a few games on Thursday night because the supply of referees is getting a little low to cover all these games on Friday night. And some of the referee crews work Thursday, Friday, Saturday games.
Wow.
So If you ever want to see high school football games up close, think about becoming a referee. Plus, you're far enough away from the field, you can't hear the fans yelling bad things at you. Back to Sidney Lehman, they need 3 wins if they want to have a home playoff game. They're already in the playoffs, but if they want to host a playoff game, they need 3 more wins. They are favored to win 4 more games, so things look pretty good for Sidney Lehman. 4-1 Ridgemont fell 1 position to number 6 after they beat 1-4 Montpelier last week. If Ridgemont wants to finish in the top 8, they probably need a mild upset over 4-1 Upper Scioto Valley, or 4-1 Hardin Northern, or 3-2 Waynesfield Goshen. One of those 3 games. Upper Scioto Valley visits Ridgemont this week, so they get their first chance at that right out of the chute. 4-1 Ansonia had a 34-28 win over 3-2 Tri-Village, which moved the Tigers up 4 spots to number 7. And it kept Tri-Village down at number 14. Ansonia has almost locked up a home playoff game. Real close. They'll probably get there in another week or 2. Tri-Village is favored in their final 5 games, and that's why we have them already as a playoff-bound team, but they are unlikely to make it into the top 8 of the standings for that home playoff game, even if they win all 5. So it's more just a matter of survival to get into the playoffs with Tri-Village. Waynesfield Goshen is 3-2. They rose 5 spots. That's a nice jump there, up to number 8 by beating 2-3 North Baltimore. The Tigers, another team, they are favored in their final 5 games. That should get them a home playoff game if they win all of them. If they win 4, it might even get them a home playoff game, although it'll be kind of tight. It'll come down to the numbers on the final night if they only win 4 of those 5. 2-3 DeGraff Riverside lost 14-7 to 2-3 Northridge. But as you remember, we said they are now playoff bound thanks to results from other games that happened this week. If they want to get into the top 8, it's going to take some tough wins, some upsets. They're doable games. They're games where they may not be favored, but it's close enough. They can get those wins if they have good game. They play a good game, so look for DeGraff Riverside to be trying to break into the top 8 before the season's done. And finally, here we have Fort Laramie at 2-3. They fell 4 spots to number 11 after a tough 28-21 loss to 4-1 Lima Central Catholic. We mentioned that last week. Fort Laramie, LCC have had some really good games through the last several years. It looks like they had another one this last week. I've been looking. There's almost no scenario that keeps Fort Laramie out of the playoffs. They're going to get in somehow here. So it would really help if they had a win over 3-2 Spencerville this week.
Are they locked in, or they're still?
Not yet.
It's not locked.
Not locked. I think they'll get there. I have a hard time coming up with the combinations that'll keep them out, but it's not for certain yet. They still have to earn it. Oh, and that brings us to our 8-man football division here. We have 3 teams of the 8 who are currently 2-0 in conference play. That'd be Toledo Christian, Sandusky, St. Mary, and Holgate. So those 3 teams look like 3 of our early favorites to grab some of the 4 playoff spots. In fact, I'd kind of bet on those 3 getting into their 14 playoff in 8-man football. That leaves a big fight for the 4th and final playoff spot. And I hear you. No one else. Or wait, Southington Chalker, Fremont St. Joe each have 1 conference win. I don't see enough to give me any idea which that 14 might be for the playoffs yet. We'll just have to see how the season pans out here.
Seems a little early in conference play.
Yeah, it's a little early for the Northern 8. They started a week later than everyone else, so they've only played most of them 4 games total, some of them only 3 yet. Oh, by the way, you may remember last week we talked a little bit about what happens if there's a tie in the conference standings for determining who makes the playoffs or who gets what seed number in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So I emailed the commissioner and he sent back a list of the tiebreakers here. And it looks quite comprehensive. First tiebreaker is head-to-head record, which makes sense, right?
Makes
But
sense.
what's intriguing, some of these teams, because there's only 8 teams in the conference, they have 7 conference games. They have 3 more games to fill out their schedule. So some of them went out of state for these games. Some of them aren't playing a full 10 games, and some are playing other teams twice, where only one of the games counts for the conference and the other one's just an extra game.
How do they decide which one counts for the conference?
If they play 2 games, the second game counts as the conference.
Okay.
So when you look at the head-to-head record for determining the tiebreaker, though, they will count both of those games if they play twice. So if they split the 2 games, that tiebreaker doesn't do any good. So then they move on to best winning percentage of total games versus conference teams. And then they have about 5 other tiebreakers after that.
Wow,
there's actually one for most touchdowns scored in conference standings games. And of course, the inevitable coin toss if none of the others work.
Wouldn't that be something if they
Yeah, because they even have a thing here about total of points scored and points allowed in games. So I can't see how they would ever get to the coin toss. That's a good thing. You should have your tiebreakers well defined so it doesn't come to something like a coin toss, right?
Right.
So 8-man football will shake itself out a little more in the next coming weeks here. But that pretty much wraps up week 5, Alex.
Was a lot.
Yep. And you know the spiel here. Anyone has any comments or questions, they should email it to me, bdmonnin@nktelco.net, or all that other stuff they could do, message on X, comment on YouTube, all that sort of thing. You can find our podcasts all over the place except Spotify, which I haven't figured out yet. One of these days. I gave up for this year. But you can find it at the Apple iTunes Store, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, or on our YouTube channel. I mean, that sounds like plenty of places to me, doesn't it to you, Alex?
It really does.
I hope your coworkers out there in California who will be looking for your work on the podcast this week aren't all counting on finding it on Spotify.
I'm saying, well, it depends. Like, should I tell them to go look on Spotify or should I tell them?
Don't tell them to look there unless you don't like them. But anyway, wherever you go for your podcast, just search for Bruce Monnin's Computer Point. You'll probably find it. I will be back next week after week 6 of the regular season. And I think our usual co-host, executive producer, and chief researcher, Rebecca, will be here also. Not positive, but I think so. That means Alex gets the week off next week. Thanks for your help. Looks like she's knitted half of a project there while we did this podcast.
Not quite half.
But anyway, for all you football fans and all you knitting fans, so long, everybody.